Dayle Ranger, Innovation Project Manager.
Thank you for joining the program today. We're here to talk a little bit about innovation in the world of energy as we see it, but kind of a pre-conversation we were having. You mentioned that you're actually from Canada, so you from the British Columbia area, and you're down in Fort Worth, Texas. But give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in Canada. I grew up in British Columbia, a small town north of Vancouver, about 3 hours. First in my family to be in the oil field. I just sort of graduated high school and needed to go out to make some quick money. I wanted to become a helicopter pilot, so started on the rigs. I've worked all over Canada, worked all over the U.S., and actually wound up in Texas because I was working in Gabon, Africa, on a drilling rig, and wanted to come back to North America, and Texas was where it was happening. So I landed a job here, and the rest is history.
Without getting too much detailed, I've heard one of the biggest differences between the U.S. and Canada is, the land and that sort of thing. Just how we approach the land in terms of whether it be agriculture, even oil and gas development. With your experiences, is there any difference with how maybe the country of Canada approaches land in any sort of way versus United States?
Yeah, I think in Canada you're dealing a lot more with the Crown's land, and so it's all government owned, and with that comes.
I was going to say, and that's what I've heard too, is the term the Crown's land. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all owned by the government, and so regulations seem to be a lot stricter, that sort of thing. So down here or in the U.S., I've seen a lot of. Obviously, you can own your own land down here, and owners own mineral rights, and so you're dealing more with landowners and mineral right owners as opposed to the government.
Okay. So what's going on in the world of innovation these days in your eyes? The innovative energy industry is going a lot of different directions, from drones to, things 2 miles below the Earth's surface to different spherical frac sand size. So what type of innovation are you kicking around these days?
Yeah, it's interesting because in my 20 years in the oil field, there's been definitely a paradigm shift in how we drill wells. I think that the world that I'm in is mostly in the drilling side of things, and so you're having downhole innovation has become sort of the phrase of today, closing the communication loop between the surface and downhole. To give you a better understanding of what exactly is going on in the well, so we can react more effectively and produce better wells, quicker wells, more efficient wells. So it's been pretty interesting.
What types of things are you seeing for closing that communication gap?
Well, rigs are coming a lot more automated. The hardware and the software that's coming on the rigs are starting to get less manual for the employees that are actually working on the rigs. The driller is becoming more of kind of an observer as opposed to running a brake handle and turning gears and turning valves and that sort of thing. So he's more of an advisor. So the computer is making more decisions today than I think it ever has. And the downhole equipment is telling you a lot more about what's going on downhole. It's very interesting as far as how many more wells we're putting on today than we have, in years past.
Well, you mentioned the word paradigm shift, and here we're talking, in the media programs, etc. The internet was our paradigm shift. When the internet came around, we had to completely rewrite our business plans. We had to figure out a new way of doing business. We had to figure out a new way of interviewing, writing stories, just everything. Everything. The internet changed all of that. Hydraulic fracturing, horizontal drilling, did that to the oil and gas companies. I've had a number of CEOs, and like John Gibson from ONEOK, for example, Harold Hamm, Continental Resources. They've told me they've had to rewrite their business plans because of this modern day technology. You mentioned paradigm shift with how we drill. Talk to me a little bit about your definition and your observation when it comes to the paradigm shift. I've seen it from a business standpoint on how we conduct business and even do our day-to-day operations. But talk to me about what you mean by that.
What I mean is data and big data. think that with the innovations and the technology that we see today, the amount of data that we're getting and that we have to sift through and try to understand has become too large for even for us to find a starting point. And yeah, the internet was a paradigm shift, but now we're looking at bandwidth. So we have all these technological advancements on the rigs, but bandwidth is becoming an issue. Generally, we drill wells in remote locations and remote areas. And how do we get all the different sensors that we have on rigs to measure various things, the different sensors and the technologies we have downhole giving us information from downhole? How do we get that back to the office in an output that can show us exactly what's going on without just looking at spreadsheets full of data? And so that's sort of the challenge of today. Is sifting through and deciphering data, because we have so much of it where we've never had much data before. You basically looked at squiggly lines on a screen to tell you what was going on, and that's changing.
So what do you see what's going to happen with the world of big data? I mean, we're seeing how it works in the world of consumerism, to where things you buy, things you talk about, websites you go to, that's big data. That's putting together your own personalized shopping experience, your own personalized website browsing experience. That's a basic example that I think the listeners will understand of a very elementary version of big data, where it's taking all these behaviors, all these different things of layers of information and putting it together and getting one output. How do you see that happening in oil, in terms of all these different layers of topography to geology to different fracking solutions and everything else like that?
I think that's the challenge, and I don't have a complete answer for you, but I think that if you look at the major operators of today, I think that's the biggest challenge they're facing, is looking at every facet of their business and all the data that's pouring in from upstream, downstream, fracking, drilling, completions, and how do we look at the data on sort of one source, one platform? Because right now, a lot of companies are going through a fusion concept or a fusion project, where they're trying to get all this data from all these different facets into one platform that everybody can look at through the company, as opposed to being segregated. Completions is segregated, drilling is segregated, pressure pumping is segregated. All these different segments are segregated, and looking at different platforms to try to cipher the data. And where the real challenge comes is how do we get it all on one, and we're all sort of talking and speaking the same language. And I don't know if there is a one solution out there right now, to be honest.
Well, a lot of that's proprietary information, I would imagine. So they don't want to share some of that, but some of it, the public, I would, I get that part of it, but it's interesting. I mean, how a lot of that's going to be used, and it's like everybody's writing their own language.
Yeah, definitely, and just innovation in and of itself is a struggle, I would say, in the oil field right now, just because we have everybody's on a day rate, right? And so when you're on a day rate and you have an operator that is drilling wells and gets all the performance and the money out of the wells, and every vendor that you have is on a day rate, and you tell them, bring me your shiny toys, bring me your innovation, spend the capital, spend the money to bring us these innovations, but you're on a day rate, so the longer you're on a well, the more money you're going to make. But then we're telling you to go out and spend this capital to shorten the well duration. And so I think that another big challenge that we're seeing right now is how do we get away from day rate? The day rate model is broken. We have all these vendors that are on day rate, and how do we get away from that? And so that's some of the things that we're working on as well, because if you don't get away from that, innovation is going to remain to be stifled.
Explain that, by the way, Dayle Ranger, Innovation Project Manager, with us, talking about some of the challenges happening in the world of innovation in the energy industry. And you mentioned day rates. Explain how that stifles innovation a little more.
So if you have a rig on location that's drilling wells for you, meaning you lease the equipment to drill, that the rig is on a day rate, and generally the services that are a bolt on to the rig are on a day rate. And so by nature, the longer those services are on a well, the more money they make. Does that part make sense?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and then an operator, which has leased and renting this equipment on a day rate to drill the well for them, reaps all the benefit of the well and how much oil or gas the well produces. But when we go to these services and we go to these vendors or these companies and say, bring us your innovation, bring us the shiny new toys, for lack of a better term, without getting into too much detail. Well, they have to go out and spend money to do that. They have to burn capital. There's a lot of money that goes into bringing the innovations to the drill site to drill faster, but they're not reaping any benefits of that. The only person that reaps the benefits is the operator.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They shorten our well durations. They don't reap any benefits, so why would they do it? And so that's definitely stifled innovation, I think, in the energy business.
Have you seen any issue with states, regulations, governments, those types of things stifling innovation or becoming roadblocks or actually becoming a hurdle between operators and innovative small companies, that sort of thing?
I haven't, to be honest, and that's, to answer your question, no.
Okay.
But I'm not that involved in that, and at my level, that's somebody that handles that much higher than me. They could probably speak to more intelligent than that, but no, I haven't seen anything. From what I've heard, the Trump administration is making things easier, but that's about as far as my knowledge will take me.
Sure. Yeah, and you're talking federal level. I was talking more state, counties, that sort of thing, because when you get down to it, the reason I bring it up is because a lot of what's going on right now, especially in the natural gas world, is these little science projects that they're trying to get their data confirmed and they're trying to get their economics in order, that sort of thing. So it's tough when you're trying to convince these operators that here we're going to reduce flaring or we're going to make some gas right on site to reduce your diesel costs, and just a number, a number of different these value added projects. Those are based on innovation, and those are exploding left and right. So kind of a very long-winded question to ask you. Are you following any of these natural gas or these on-site innovative projects that are happening? I call them science projects. Are you following any of those, whether it's converting, natural gas to, liquid natural gas on site or, with something like that? And are you following any of this new technology and that side of innovation?
Yeah, I think I have a very limited knowledge of it, but I think that a lot of that is very dependent on where you are in the country and what play you're in, and how the gas essentially is coming out of the ground for it to make sense. I think that when you look at areas like Marcellus, where the gas comes out very clean and doesn't need much refining, using your well gas to support equipment on location or support the flaring equipment, it makes much more sense. I think when other areas where the gas doesn't come out as clean, it needs much more refining. It makes it the numbers and the dollars are a little bit more challenging, as well as road traffic. If you add trucks, more trucks on the road, trucks coming into location than are currently already coming in, it's hard to justify doing that. So that's very limited knowledge, but that's kind of how it's played out.
What projects are you working on right now in the innovation world?
Oh, we have a lot of different projects we're working on. Basically, rig equipment, rig automation. How do we further automate the drilling process, and how do we close that communication loop I spoke about earlier? One of the things that technology brings that I think has been overlooked is it feels like to the field staff that's out on these locations is that technology is coming to replace their jobs. And I think that, we've done a poor job of communicating that really isn't the case. Um, Jobs may be repurposed, but I don't think the technology will replace the jobs. And I think that as rigs become more technologically advanced, you have to look at changing the experience for the people on location. I think that, as rigs themselves haven't changed in 50 years, I think neither has the accommodations and the experience of the people in the field. And so, as the demographic of rig hands change to suit the technological advancements on the rigs, we need to change the overall experience on location. If somebody coming out of university is going to pick an Apple, a Google, an Amazon as just an example, or come to a rig site for training or to progress their degree, we have to change, the feel and the experience on location. We can't stick them in a 1970s trailer that has an upgraded TV and an upgraded leather couch and call it good. So that's stuff that we're looking into.
Well, I think the important part of what you talked about, in my opinion, is something we've been mentioning on this show for years, which is the changing of the energy industry's jobs. And they're not going away. They're being repurposed is a very good way to put it, because they're first of all, they're not slinging chains anymore. I think most people are agreeing with the fact that the energy workers are not your old slinging chains roughnecks.
Right.
Now, we've got a lot more engineers, and there's a lot more technology involved. And I see the way of the 2-year trades, whether it be the welders, the electricians, the pipe fitters, the artificial intelligence, and the sensories. Those are the trades that you're starting to see more and more. In the Bakken, for example, they're hiring like 30, 40,000 people. Well, they've been hiring those people for a year or 2 years now. And the reason that they've been hiring that is because these are specialized jobs. So these are new jobs to the marketplace. And either an old dog has got to go back and learn new tricks, or, he'll go the way of the television repairman. And that's just the way it is. Technology has changed so many jobs that some people do have to get recertified or get reeducated in certain areas, because technology has made some of these jobs a lot more specific. Man, I was surprised that just universities now, the majors are getting even more specific. So we're living in a pretty specialized world. But just your comments on the change of those jobs, those repurposing to where, how do you see those jobs being repurposed, I guess?
Well, I think it just goes back to reiterate what you just said. The dynamics are changing, and I think that they as an energy industry, we're struggling to retain people as it is, because of the downturn, and people go away and don't come back. And I think that we have sort of upgraded how we bring people into companies. The onboarding process has gotten a lot better for safety purposes. But I think where we can change is training programs for repurposing these folks, to tell them, hey, don't worry, you're going to have a job, but here's courses you're going to have to take, because this is what we have in mind for based on your work history and your skill set. And I don't think those sorts of communications are happening. And I think people are just sort of out working and wondering sort of what tomorrow is going to bring. And so I think we need to start having those conversations with folks, and letting them know that, hey, you have a job here, but these are some of the things you have to freshen up on, or these are some certificates or diplomas that you're going to have to get. Here they are. They're scheduled for you. Do them on your days off, that sort of thing, so we can get you into the next group of skill set.
I'd like to go ahead.
I also think that just, again, changing the experience level on location. Like I said, we're still sticking people in an upgraded 1970 mobile home on the side of location, and I think we have to change that. I think that when you sit in conferences, these IADC conferences, and they talk about sort of office settings, the only thing you ever hear is office setting. How do we change our offices for the new generation? And I have yet to see somebody change the location experience for our field guys. And I think that we can connect C-suite to field level, by upgrading communications in these trailers. I think we can get people out of sharing bunk beds and having, 2, 3 guys to a room. I think we can sort of, we can cut costs in other places and change how these trailers are set up to more of a personalized experience. We could maybe have a 30-inch screen in each room, just as an example, and have somebody have their own private room so they can talk to their families when they're away. If the CEO sees that the crew at night did a good job operating the rig or tripping out of the hole, he could send a message to their shacks when they lay down to bed at night. They got a message from the CEO saying, "Hey, great job tonight." And I think that's something that we've missed. We've kind of lost the importance of people because we're so hyper focused on technology and what technology is going to bring.
I've never heard the upgrading the on-site guys' living quarters before. That's you think that's something that a movement that would have happened by now? Is there any reason that hasn't happened? Is it too hard for to get mobile homes out there, or is it hard to get a decent living quarters out there? Because I know what you mean. I've been out there before. It's not the Ritz, not by any means.
No, it definitely isn't. And I think for retention. Retention is a big problem right now. I think for retention, there's a lot of fat that you can cut off these trailers that really isn't being used. It's kind of like your home, right? You can look at studies that have been done. How much time do you spend in your formal dining room in a year's time? Maybe 2 meals a year, and the rest of it just sits there not being used. And so I think there's a lot of those type scenarios in the shacks where you can cut some fat to cut some costs in certain areas and put that money towards other areas that would improve the experience for the people out there. And I think it's a cost thing, of course. It's going to cost money. I get that. But I think there's definitely, it's just a matter of partnering up with a forward-thinking sort of trailer company to come up with solutions. And I just think it's something that we've missed because we've been hyper-focused on technology and going to more sort of remote centers and stuff. But the fact of the matter is we still have people out there working.
Well, I find it interesting because it is definitely an upgraded cost, and energy companies, they're not opposed to doing things like this a lot of times if it means a happier employee, because they understand these guys do put a lot of work in and sacrifices are made. And there's a reason guys show up with big T-bones and they do grills, and they spend quite a bit of money making sure these guys have got a per diem, etc. So
right.
On LinkedIn, for example, a social media site that I'm on, I get these innovative videos that appear on my home feed, and one of them is these trailers that just kind of pop out, and they show up as like it looks like a trailer on the back of I should say a container on the back of a train. But they all of a sudden pop out into like a two-story nice little house. Have you seen these?
Yeah, I've seen them, and exactly.
Is that what you're talking about? Something along those lines, to where it's a totally new concept that most people aren't even thinking of. But at the same time, like I said, you can have one of these shipping containers. I don't know what they cost, but shipped out there, and all of a sudden you got a 2-story, 4-bedroom house.
Right. I think, that's definitely something to look at. The age of I don't know what they're called, the mini homes or the smaller homes, whatever
tiny
they're
homes,
called.
Tiny houses.
Yeah, tiny houses.
Yeah, but those guys wouldn't do well in a tiny house.
No, of course. The type of I don't know what you would call it, technology. I wouldn't really call it technology that goes into those tiny homes, and just the thinking of how to maximize a space, I think could be used in a different, sort of area. And you could take how those guys maximize the space and put sort of those improvements into some sort of trailer or C-can or however you want to do it.
That's interesting. Yeah, like I said, I wanted to flesh that one out a little bit. It's the first time I've heard that about upgrading living quarters of the on-site. Something I think most people would get behind. It's surely an economics issue at that point. Let me ask you about another conversation that's going through the industry. Dayle Ranger is with us, innovative project manager. And it's the retirement that's happening over the next 5 years. It was 10 years, but now it's probably 5 years that something like over 50% of the industry, 70% of the industry is going to be retiring. And so there's kind of this vetting process that's going on where with the new people that are coming into the industry, the people who are retiring, they want to make sure that the new leaders and the new spokesmen and et cetera have an understanding for the industry, how it was built, and the respect that goes along with it. Are you hearing anything along those lines as far as the legacy planning, the retirement that's happening, the vetting, just kind of that whole changing of the guard that seems to be going on in the energy industry? Or are you not involved in those day-to-day type of scenarios?
Yeah, no, I'm not involved in it, but I see it. I definitely see a changing of the guard, even in the field. I know there's a lot of discontent with sort of training your replacement, and that those sort of things that come along with that, especially in the field. I'm more connected to the field than I am sort of upper level management.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some not discontent, but there is definitely an understanding of sort of the guys that come up without a college education and those sorts of things are kind of they're feeling like they're training their replacements to the people who have degrees, and I understand where they're coming from, but the world is changing, but I think there's a happy balance. I don't have a degree, and I work in an office that are full of people with degrees, and we can find areas that we work really well on. But I think technology is going to close a lot of those gaps. I think that a reason for there's sort of, you have the main categories of why companies are chasing technologies, and then you have these subcategories of why they're chasing technology. And what I mean by technology, I mean is sort of the autonomy and the automation of things. And I think that the software in this equipment is being looked at to sort of close the gap of the I don't know what you want to call it, the big crew change, they're calling it, right? So that's kind of what they're looking to. From what I've heard is the technology of the autonomy and the automation is hopefully going to help close some of that gap, the learning transfer.
Yeah, I see that. I know that growing pains or butting of heads, or just like I said earlier, some old dogs, they don't want to learn new tricks, and there's that technology integration growing pain that's happening. The other part of that I wanted to ask you is more from the social cause side of things, to where it almost seems like in today's world you can't even tie your shoe without somebody accusing you of being a Democrat or a Republican or having a social agenda. But millennials, for example, a lot of them were instructed to have a social cause as they entered the workplace. So, environmentalism, for example, is a big social cause. When you layer in that extremism that we have in the world today, and then you layer in that kind of the new embracement of a social cause into the professional world, there's some uncertainty there too as well in the oil and gas sector of things. Are you feeling any of that side of things with either the world of extremism or the social cause of that kind of the changing of the guard?
Short answer is no. I don't. I haven't sort of been. I don't see it from my level and sort of in the field level. I think you're the party that you're associated with, or whether you're extreme one way or the other. It really sort of shakes out at the field level. It's just about whether you can do the work or not. And so that's really kind of my experience with that.
Well, I'll give you a couple examples just to give you an idea that it goes beyond like politics and et cetera. A couple years ago when I was in Colorado doing some business, I was staying at a hotel or whatever, having some conversation with folks that I met that morning just in the breakfast bar area. And right. She worked for a natural gas company, and she paused, looked over her shoulders before she said that she works in the natural gas world. Because in Colorado, it's like that at times where, they tried to get fracking banned, for example. So, right. Yeah, in some circles, it gets pretty extreme, and it gets pretty political, and it gets pretty social caused, and it's, like I said, you can't even tie your shoe in some cases without somebody making an accusation, and you're like, no, I just tie my shoes since I was a kid. I've been doing it. But okay, well, it's good to see you, and you're down there in Dallas, so
Yeah, and
um,
I've definitely, there's a town not too far from here called Denton, Texas, and I've definitely seen with some operators some protesting at their sites because the town was very against fracking, and there was some rumors going around about how fracking was causing earthquakes, which I don't know. I want to say that there was some studies put out that says that's not the case, but I'm no expert in that field and by no means pretend to be. And then I was also in Denver back about 8 or 9 years ago, and all the living arrangements that were set up as far as these man camps that were being set up all over the place, they didn't like them. They thought they were a problem in the area,
sure.
and so there was a big push to get rid of the man camps, and that's really been my extent of experience as far as that stuff goes.
And to me, that's the normal protesting type things. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot because a lot those crew camps, man camps, they have a lot of benefit to communities. They're temporary for a reason. And up in North Dakota, we saw firsthand the benefits of them. There's a reason that they were there. And you build too fast, and all of a sudden, you have a bunch of leftover single family housing, and they go vacant, and the market kind of goes under. And so I've seen them work pretty closely and that sort of thing. So anyway, I just more of the social cause thing. So I'm glad to hear that you're not seeing it down there. I've seen it in other parts of the country and this and that. And so it's always refreshing when I find somebody that doesn't run into it, because I'd say 9 out of 10 do. So
Yeah, definitely.
it's refreshing. So okay, just kind of summing up here a little bit. We got Dayle Ranger, Innovation Project Manager, talking a little innovation and some just conversations that are happening in the energy industry. Anything that we missed? Anything you want to reiterate? I'd like to give guests the final word, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, like I think I've pretty much covered it. I think the energy industry is headed in the right path. I think, as far as from my experience and the level that I sit at, I went over some sort of holes that I think we've missed, but there's a lot of good work going on to sort of automate drilling, get to autonomy, and do it safely and environmentally stewardly as we can. So that's really it. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.